Welcome to the Healthy Reasonings podcast with Dr. Andre. You are now listening to your number one source for clear, unfiltered conversations about your health and wellness. Join us every Tuesday for success stories, educational topics, and interviews with wellness experts from around the world. You can listen to this podcast on your computer, phone, or any other electronic device that streams podcasts, or download each episode and listen to it on the go. Let's get started with today's episode.
Hopefully not too rocky today. Trying to stabilize this so you guys don't see me bouncing all over the place, but if you do, that's okay. Today we're talking about emotions and the concept of cellular memory. Put this bag over my shoulder here. And the whole concept of cellular memory is that we believe that memory is stored as some memories are like stored in our brain, is probably what we're thinking. But the truth is that most of the Eastern world and maybe Central Europe thinks that memories are actually stored in different parts of the body. And it's in these different parts of the body that we have especially negative memories stored. And because they're stored in different parts of the body and in the cells of these different organs, they're considered to be cellular memory. This is important because if we look at the diseases that occur, and especially cancer, it kind of gives us a clue as to the possible contributors. All right, I was thinking of taking that path, but no, let's take this one. So if we think about the possible contributors to cancer, what we're thinking about is that, for example, an organ like the liver, according to Chinese or Eastern medicine, is associated with anger and resentment. And that means that if a person develops enough anger and resentment stored in the liver, potentially what will happen is the liver becomes overwhelmed, just like a hard drive or a jump drive that has too much information stored on it. It runs out of space. And when it runs out of space, it ends up overloading the liver, so to speak, and so the organ doesn't behave as it should. Probably stop here where it's nice and cool because it's pretty hot today. And if the organ is not behaving as it should, then the organ is dysfunctional, poorly regulated, and as a result, prime for not just primary disease, not just a cancer starting there, but also it's interesting for me to see how my patients have cancer that starts in one organ, presumably the organ where the hard drive or the jump drive got overloaded first and then spreads to another. So for example, I recently met a gentleman who has, at first they found a mass in his liver, which they strongly suspected was cancer. And this is a current situation, but it's actually pretty common because it happens pretty often. And yeah, the doctors, of course, they're gonna say, hey, I wonder where this is coming from. What are we gonna do about it? They take a biopsy of the tissue involved and they'll say, hey, I want to figure out if cancer is there first of all and where was the likely origin. It could be coming from the liver itself, but most likely it's coming from somewhere else. So I meet this gentleman before the biopsy takes place, and I can pretty much tell that, okay, based on my knowledge, this man probably has a lot of anger and resentment. And true to form, while I'm talking to him, I'm meeting him for the first time, and he asked some very stinging questions. And I'm saying to myself, why are you, I don't know this man, I don't know you. Why are you already coming at me with attitude, so to speak? And sure enough, when you trace back to what's happening in his personal life, as he eventually admitted, there's a lot of emotions there, specifically anger and resentment. So how does this inform how we deal with our patients? A patient of mine actually recommended a book to me recently called A Carcinogenic Mind, written by a Ukrainian doctor. I highly recommend that you read it. If you read it, you'll probably finish it before me because I've been pretty busy and haven't gotten a chance to finish it. But it's a good book so far. In the first 3 pages, it already embraces a lot of the stuff that I've said on this podcast a million times. I need to remember to look into the camera. And it's refreshing to hear from another doctor about how important the emotions are for our health and how much of a role they play in disease in general. So back to the story. So this gentleman was very combative when I started talking to him and saying, hey, do you think there could be an emotional root to what's happening with you? He didn't want to hear that, even though he knew deep down that he was struggling. And I'm going to show you a chart shortly of the different organs and their emotions that are associated with them. You probably see it on social media. You probably see it on, you've seen it on the internet, so it's nothing new. But it's important for you to observe it and understand that there are emotional roots to our illnesses. And because of the concept of cellular memory, we can almost map in 2 ways. One, we can map based on somebody's emotions where their likely disease origin is. But also, as I did with this gentleman, we can map for somebody who presents with, in this case, cancer, which is the most extreme form of cellular overload. We can literally map where, which emotion he's probably dealing with, he or she is probably dealing with, or a set of emotions. So if we look at the liver, gallbladder, we see anger, resentment, and so many other things. If we look at the kidneys and the bladder, genitourinary system, interestingly, that's usually associated with shame. So issues of the kidney, bladder, and that region, usually associated with shame or fear. Very interesting. And I know somebody's gonna say, but there's a lot of overlap looking at this chart. And that's fine, because emotions generally are not always black and white. For example, there's very little difference between guilt and shame. It's kind of, might almost feel like you're hard pressed to tell what the difference would be. So in the same way, the same negative emotion could be stored on different sectors of the drive, if you want to think of it that way. All the computer people rejoice. So when I first came across this concept, I was doing my own journey with emotions. And so it was refreshing for me to have the opportunity to evaluate my own health on the background of some of the emotions I was dealing with. Interestingly, that was critical to my story ultimately in terms of walking away from the hospital and embracing this new way of doing things. I'm gonna rest under here. So cellular memory then means, get this up here. Cellular memory then means that if I can help a patient to remove some of the data, the negative emotions that are present on their hard drive, say for example, anger and resentment in this gentleman, and we look at the emotion and we help the person to process what's happening, what it does is it takes some of the negative emotional data that was being stored there, and in my experience, it literally detoxes it. Believe it or not, it actually detoxifies the organ once you deal with the emotions. So track with me. Oh, almost had an accident with my camera. Track with me here. I had a patient in 2016 thereabout who would wake up in the morning and just cry. There would be times in our treatment protocol where she'd just wake up and cry from morning till evening. And I said to myself, this is crazy. The first time it happened, she called me and she said, Doc, I've been crying from morning till evening. I don't know what this is. I don't even know what I'm crying about. And I said to her, okay, I'm not sure, but I think this is the body trying to release something. Go and do a specific type of detox. And I told her what to do. And sure enough, within 10 minutes of doing the detox, all the crying stopped completely, just like a pipe switched off. She was surprised, I was surprised. But it taught me that emotions take up physical space, again, playing into the cellular memory concept. And because they take up physical space, when they are processed, they literally need to be detoxified. Now, people use different phrases for this. People will say, well, you need to shift the energy around. You've done an energetic shift, and so your body is going to respond. Some people will say you're moving energy from one place to the other. All I really say is, listen, emotions behave like physical chemicals in the body, in my experience, and they need to be detoxified just as much as an insecticide, a pesticide, or industrial chemical of some sort would need to be removed. And so let's look at the lung, for example. The lung is classically associated with grief. Now, imagine somebody who, let's just say for argument's sake, they start off with a problem in the kidney, a cancer of the kidney, a mass in the kidney, and you realize that it has spread to the liver and to the lungs. As doctors, what we would say is this patient has stage 4 kidney cancer, and we're going to treat with the appropriate physical treatments to try and help the body in the different areas. But one could easily also look at cellular memory and say, well, what is this patient's life experience? And I'm not saying this is all there is to it, but at least a part of what's happening with this picture is the patient's life experience has been where they lived in fear and shame for an extended period of time. Because of this, let's say they were afraid of somebody or ashamed of how someone had treated them. Because of this, they would have anger and resentment towards a person. And then ultimately, what would happen is, let's say the person they were angry or resentful of passed away. Complicated situation, because now they have to deal with the grief of losing that person, and at the same time they never got the chance to truly release the anger and resentment or the fear and the shame they felt about that person. Now, the disclaimer to all of what we're discussing today is this is not the be all and end all. Remember, I keep emphasizing that an effective cancer treatment protocol must have 4 different arms. You guys are going to be tired of hearing this. But there are people who have taken this to the extreme and have tried to suggest that for every disease, or in particular cancer, the only thing that needs to be done is to treat the emotions. And this is irresponsible and it's unlikely to work, as has been shown. Of course, you'll have people who will get significantly better because their predominant issue was their emotions. But a comprehensive, holistic approach has to be taken to every disease, and in particular cancer. Otherwise, we're going to have less than successful outcomes. So I would not be naive enough to think that cellular memory, though it is a hypothesis and a concept that I'm strongly interested in, I don't think that it's a solution, the only solution for cancer or other diseases, but it's something that we keep overlooking. And in the days of my training, my residency training as a postgraduate doctor, to become an oncologist, I'll never forget a lady who every single time she came for her chemo treatment, she would take me aside and hold on to my hand and ask me one question. The question was always, Doc, do you think that stress could have a role to play in all of this? Do you think that stress could have a role to play? And I'd always say, maybe, but I don't think so. I mean, the chemo itself is stressful enough for you. That's probably all there is. But she kept asking me over and over and over. And I realize now that it was God trying to tell me to look more closely at the emotional contributors to diseases such as cancer so that they can be addressed. I'm going to take a quick break. We're going to talk about the usual stuff, and then we'll come back and I'll tell you some more stories to highlight the concept of cellular memory. Be right back.
Healthy Reasoners. You asked and we listened. After enjoying today's episode, you can now send Dr. Andre your comments via WhatsApp. That's right, WhatsApp your comments or voice messages to us at 1-876-405-7831. In fact, take a moment to send us a WhatsApp right now. If it's really good, Dr. Andre will read it in the next episode. Once again, that's 1-876-405-7831. Send us your message now. We can't wait to hear from you.
And we're back. It's a particularly noisy day for some reason. Very windy. And I'm by the seaside, so it only makes sense, right? So, let me see if I can turn this way. Nice cloud cover coming up, thank God. Yeah, so we know that cellular memory is something we should at least be thinking about. I'll talk about two things. Have you ever noticed that when you get really overwhelmed, you cry? And some cultures believe that the release of tears is actually an aid to the release of the emotions. And I don't think they're far off with that. I think they're probably quite right. So that means, again, we see a physical manifestation of an emotional issue and a physical release of emotions through tears. Yeah. So stories. Let's take this story. I'm always fascinated by brain cancer. Always fascinated by it. And I'll tell you why. Like all of my other stories, I've had a really interesting experience or experiences with brain cancer. Whether the cancer has started in the brain or whether it started somewhere else and spread to the brain. Because we're talking about cellular memory and we're saying where the different organs are and what they relate to which emotions. And almost 100% of the time, when I think about brain cancer, what I realized is that this person usually is struggling with a pattern of negative thinking about themselves. Negative thinking about themselves. It looks like it's gonna rain. Some sun just blew into my face. Let me pause here. All right. So a freak sandstorm just happened and blew a lot of sun into my face. But then it reminded me that I could do this camera angle looking out at the sea. And it gives me the opportunity to walk and think. Yeah, so it's always a negative opinion of oneself, or repeated negative thoughts spoken about the person, or negative words spoken over the person. For me, I feel like it literally forms like a ball of thoughts that's bundled up in the person's brain. Hard to believe, but that has been my experience. The very first time I thought about this was 2017 thereabout. I met a gentleman with primary brain cancer. There's a glioblastoma. He had already done all the relevant treatments and they had said they weren't working. And he came to see me. And for some reason, I decided to ask him this question about the possibility that emotions were playing a role. And I asked him about his childhood. Very interesting thing, because he had this tumor in his brain, and he said something so weird to me. He said, when I was little, my mom used to always give me a pot to wash out. And she'd send me to wash the pot, but as a little boy, so I really struggled with washing it clean. And every time I brought the pot to her for her to inspect it after I washed it, she would not just say it wasn't washed properly, but she would call me stupid, she would verbally abuse me, tell me that I'm no good, good for nothing, etc. And on one particular instance, he could recall carrying the pot to her, and she got so upset that she took the cover of the pot and hit him in the head with it while telling him how stupid he was. Now, healthy reasoners, you don't need to be a rocket scientist to figure out what happened. Yes, the cancer or tumor formed exactly where he had gotten that first blow from her. And he remembers it because the ear remained tender up until that day. And also he felt like the ear was slightly depressed. So, walking again. So here I have a gentleman who 50, 60 years after, he develops this tumor in the brain. But the other thing with him was he also was somebody who worked at the airport, and his job was to load and unload the baggage onto the plane when the plane landed or was about to take off. And as a part of his job, he had to spray the undercarriage or the storage area of the plane with pesticides, because it was coming from different countries and so on. So that was part of his job. And yep, forms this cancer. And the easy thing to do would be, first of all, focus on killing the cancer cells, which his conventional doctors had already done, and it was not successful. The second thing to do would be to focus on detoxification, which I had implemented for him. The third thing would be to focus on supporting his body, which, somebody had already told him to take certain herbs and superfoods and so on. But what was missing from this gentleman's story was addressing the emotions. And that day when I started to talk to him about it, he broke down in tears in the office, because it suddenly hit home for him, the connection between everything that had happened. And so I think added to this chart should be the brain. And the brain is critical to understand patients who develop brain tumors and which emotions are likely to be there. And in my experience, if we can just unravel all those decades of wrong thinking and negative emotions, almost 100% of the time. Well, I don't know where we got cut off, if we did, but I know there's gonna be somebody who's watching who is gonna say, well, why is Dr. Andre talking about emotions all the time? What's he trying to get at? And what I'm trying to do is keep sticking my finger into the wound that nobody is talking about. Because if I can irritate the people enough that we start talking about emotions openly as a key to helping patients get better, then I mean, it's gonna make my life easier. It's gonna make people healthier in general. It's gonna play a role in both disease treatment and disease prevention, which means it's gonna play a role in both cancer treatment and cancer prevention. And that's what I'm aiming for. So we don't talk about this enough, I think. And there may be people watching who, healthy reasoners, you're probably saying to yourself, yeah, but I don't have cancer. But this information is still useful to you because it can help you to prevent getting cancer in the first place by taking care of your emotions. And if that wasn't enough, you can also think about the fact that we're not just saying that negative emotions cause cancer, but negative emotions will also cause maybe some of those diseases that we don't really know why they're happening. And you may actually be somebody who struggles with one of them. So let's look at the chart and let's look at kidney, for example. If you're somebody who struggles with, if you're a female, struggles with recurrent UTIs, always getting urinary tract infections, or maybe even yeast infections, or kidney stones, or bladder pain, or anything in that general region, in addition to the work that your doctors are doing to help you, or that you're doing to try and help yourself, you might want to look at whether emotions are playing a role. Because if they are, the earlier you know is the better. And you can integrate some of the things I've taught you today into helping yourself. Because if you have any of the emotions listed, if you're struggling with them, whether knowingly or unknowingly, then what we artificially call stress as a catch-all basket for everything that we struggle with could actually be better defined as I'm dealing with, or you're dealing with, fear, or shame, or guilt, or any of the emotions shown here. And when you tackle them, especially with the help of a professional, then you have the ability to address them. And who knows, as I've seen happen many times, you may very well find that your disease lessens or even disappears. So I'm gonna have to run now because it's going to rain. I'll show you what's happening. This is where I'm headed. Beautiful Harmony Beach Park. But in the distance you can see the rain clouds gathering, and I do have quite a decent distance to walk before I get to shelter. For those of you who live in Montego Bay, this is a good park to visit. For those of you who don't, I live where you vacation, and maybe you need to move to Montego Bay. So I'll catch you guys in the next episode where I'm gonna share in a little bit more detail. I think I'm gonna give emotions a rest for a little bit, allow you to absorb, to saturate in everything I've shared over the past few episodes. And then we're gonna talk about something else for a while and probably come back and jab at it later on. For those of you who may be curious, this is a particular tree that has lots of superfood powers. And it's flowering now, which is nice. And there was a time when this tree was raided because of all the power that it was thought to give. So if you know what this is, write it in the comments if you know what this tree is. All right. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Hopefully I don't get soaked in this rain because it's actually coming down. I did not calculate this well. That's okay. I have about a quarter mile to walk and then I'm safe. So let's run. See you guys later.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Healthy Reasonings podcast. Remember to subscribe to this podcast so you can be updated as soon as new episodes are ready. If you have a question, send us a voice note on WhatsApp or a WhatsApp message. The WhatsApp number is 1-876-405-7831. For more information or to become a sponsor, please email wellnessdocjamaica@gmail.com. See you soon.